Listen. There's something I wish to share with you.
Trust in me. Just in me.
Families who spent the day indoors stepped outside briefly.
Trust in me. Hold still, please. You can
Everything you're doing! From the capital to the streets of Birmingham, the message was the same.
knowing
This was Sheffield, and this Middlesbrough, as the sound of grateful applause rang across the United Kingdom.
slip into silent slumber. Sail on a silver mist. Slowly and surely your senses will cease to resist. You're snoring.
Now, deep in the British jungle.
I can't be bothered with that. I have no time for that sort of nonsense.
Some other time.
Hello there. I wish to speak to you, those people who enjoy my films, and those newcomers, about the philosophy, to a degree, and the thought behind my artworks, those which are real artworks, and my films on my channel. Partly because there are a few of you out there who very pleasantly, clearly enjoy my work and find it interesting. And so I wish to not be too coy and share with you some of my thoughts, which I haven't done. There is a sort of a golden rule. There are a couple of reasons for that. There's a golden rule, in a way, in the arts, that you don't explain what you're doing, you show it. And I've been following that philosophy to a certain degree. Also, I was in some of my previous films. Also, I'm very well aware that if you wish to challenge certain ways of thinking that you don't wish to see dominate, I'm personally of the mind that you can easily actually promote the very thing you wish to challenge by challenging it. In other words, you allow the opposition, so to speak, to frame the argument and to dictate what you talk about in challenging them. So for a long time, I tried to actually very consciously avoid doing that. Avoid directly arguing against something, and instead attempted to, in my own little way, create some artworks that simply went in another direction, an alternative aspect. So, in doing that, much of the time I've hardly spoken, or very little, about the topics which are concerning me, which are behind what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm going to break that rule and lay those out to a degree as far as is possible. I'm sat on the top of a moor in Pembrokeshire in southwest Wales. I've spent the winter down here. I live in a van, and I've spent the winter down here. It's very mild in the southwest corner of the British Isles. You get the Gulf Stream coming up, and hitting. It's just running either side of me now. Just to the left of this shot, there's the bay of Newport Bay. I'm just near Fishguard. You might have heard Fishguard on the shipping forecast. It's a very mild place. That's what you're looking at here. The moor, just half a mile back from the coast, back from the west coast of Wales, in the land of the dragons. I was born in North Wales, and it has, although I doubtless have a little bit of Celtic ancestry somewhere. I'm not primarily a Celt, but yeah, I was born and brought up. I was born in Wales, so I feel at home here to a certain degree. Can you hear the wind whistling past the van? It's a good place to be. A lot of space to think. That is something I am gifted with, and have made a lot of effort to make sure I have that space. So, yes, there is going to be a certain amount of meandering in this video. And as with all my films, it will call to a degree upon your patience. I beg your patience. But I hope too there are some things of interest to think about. If you yourself are an artist or, yes, of one way or another, whether that be through writing, through video, through music, any other artistic pursuit, maybe this will give you some thoughts. And if not, maybe it'll inspire you to consider the arts for yourself, building your own way. So a little bit, I thought I'd begin, the obvious place to begin, which is something I've never done in any of my works, is to actually introduce who I am and where I come from in as far as skill set and all the rest of it. Yes, I was born to onto a farm. My mother was from sort of upper middle class, verging on old English aristocratic lines. My father was a real wild child of sorts, in as much as he, not in the rock and roll sense, but he was in very vague terms, a sort of a loner who had a difficult upbringing, and he, in the 60s, was a man who, he when he came of age, he sort of bought motorbikes. He would work on building sites, earn danger money. He worked on the Victoria Tunnel and things like that. He'd work for a few months on highly paid building jobs, then buy himself a Norton Dominator, was the bike he liked, and he'd ride off around the Middle East and over to India, but very much a loner. Not my mother, I remember her saying she liked him because the other sort of hippie circles, they all sat on a sofa stone talking about travelling and doing this stuff, and my father, he actually did it. But consequently, yeah, he wasn't a sort of hippie as such. He worked as a carpenter, a very, very skilled, practical man, and he taught me a lot in that way. Very skilled artist who draws beautifully, a brilliant eye in that way, and very, very adept mechanic from all that experience. He designed and built his own machines on a farm when I was a boy. So he was, yeah, very, very practically top level in that way, and very broadly skilled in that sense. So I was very much brought up around, there was it's curious juxtaposition there in the home, because it was a hill farm and there was no money around. It was a potato and sheep farm. There was almost no money to be seen, and we were very much farm kids, me and my three sisters. And yet on the other side, on my mother's side, there were these quite, yes, a lot of highly reputed, my uncles were sort of Eton boys who went on to have illustrious sort of careers, which I won't mention them here, but they're both very well-known authors, and one of them's works in the field of history, and he's very renowned in that world.
The world of the ancestors obviously doesn't exist, but in their minds it did, and the ancestors were in league with something bigger and something more powerful. So by linking yourself to heroic figures in the past, you were linking yourself into God.
So it was a strange, and in there, my father coming from a manor house, so we had this very strange juxtaposition. I'd go from this muddy farmyard and out in the Yorkshire moors, where that was, and then we'd occasionally go to family gatherings on my mother's side and eat on a silver service table around this sort of leaf table. It was a very strange. So I think at a very early stage that began, it was influential on me in as much as I didn't belong to any one social group specifically, and I had these strange kind of double life and strange juxtaposition, where there was all this apparent sort of social status on my mother's side, and then yet going and standing in the snow in my t-shirt with the farm lads, and being a farm lad myself, and yet it was all a curious juxtaposition there of social placing.
The castle is the home of the Durden-Robertson family. And if Lawrence and his sister Olivia look like actors provided for the part by central casting, don't be mistaken. They're very real people. And it comes as no surprise to learn that both are devout students of the occult. The Robertsons believe in traditions more ancient than Christianity, and for both of them, life before birth goes on just as much as life after death. So when they speak of their ancestors, it's as if they were here today.
We have a link with Lady Esmond, who was granddaughter of Grania Whale, Queen or Hereditary Queen of Connaught. Now her spirit is meant to come here, I won't use the word haunt, at the end of the back avenue down there, accompanied by a white cat, and she's meant to comb her hair by the light of the moon. So you get that 17th century, and a lovely link, I think, with Grace O'Malley.
I gradually turned to a wider experience of deity from what I'd been used to include the mythologies and the religions, I would call it, of all the great civilizations.
So I think that was very formative in a way, and it foreshadowed what came later in my life. So I began, one of the first arts I really immediately took to was drawing. My father taught me to draw at an early age with some crafted skill, how to use line, and I learnt about geometry. That was my sort of prime. Through school, it was always my drawing. I would get sent to show my drawings to the other kids and things like that. Drawing was what I was really immediately good at, and design. And in with that, I worked in the farm workshop. I'd always be fiddling around from a young age. I think at about age 7, my father showed me how to use most of the machines in the workshop. They're all old kind of machines that can kill you in a moment. You have to just touch the rubber parts, don't touch the metal parts in case the whole thing's live. All these old pillar drills and things that he'd bought for a £5 from some old vicar in or some old closing down woodyard or something. It was all very, yes, which gave me a lot of a very good way to learn, because you have to really be very respectful. Look at that. Can you see that? Is that a hawk? There's some kind of bird of prey just flying past there. He's a beauty. So yes, I learnt metalworking and taught myself, or was quickly taught, and then taught myself how to weld. And I was always inventing and building, making things in the workshop, and helping my old man on his machines and things. So that practical side was embedded at a very early age. And also, obviously, working on the farm to a degree. I had a real love, strangely positioned love of hunting in there. But there was also a lot of philosophical thought. From both sides. I'd say my mother was very much on the sort of left-wing liberal side, and my father had a different... Today you would probably say he was somewhere on the right, but in a very... in as much as he always embedded me with a respect for human nature and to pay great attention to one's own natural impulses. He embedded that in me from a young age, from, well, when I became adolescent, to respect those things in order to not get into positions where you were in too much conflict, to a sort of, in a way, what I consider today a certain amount of shamanic thinking there. For example, if you got into real difficulty and you were depressed, it was an indicator that you had something to sort out and you needed to go towards it and not run from it. So that was kind of that philosophy. It's, yes, rather brutal shamanic philosophy in that way, what I consider shamanic in a degree, was embedded in me from quite an early age. So that went on through my life, that followed me. This, doing, today you might call it in terms of Carl Jung, not that I've actually read Carl Jung myself, but I think it's called shadow work. That kind of thing was in there. So after my adolescence, I went off and began working, not to get too into detail. I did some instrument making, became some skilled woodwork, and then went more into metalwork, all the way design running through it, an invention to a degree. Worked in a small factory in which I built jigs and had to innovate ways of producing things, and worked my way through industry, skilled metalworking, stainless steel for anybody who's interested, TIG welding, which I took to, and alongside that I was in bands and music and performing as a frontman in bands. An outrageous little singer in some heavy metal bands. And then, yes, that merged into funk and jazz and all sorts, and my musical taste opened right out. And eventually that led me into, I acquired the skills to a very diverse skill set. I began accumulating this very diverse skill set. I wrote poetry all the way through, and that then evolved into writing short stories and prose. So I started building a very diverse skill set and became known for that amongst my social circle. I was a bass player. But whatever I did, I tried to do it very well, and most of the time succeeded. I was a great practicer. I learned from my mother, it's one very important thing in my life, the importance of practice. It really struck me later in life when I met people who said, "Oh, I can't do that. No, I'm no good at that." And I suddenly realised that how the sort of tragedy that they hadn't ever been taught about the discipline of practice and how you can get good at something, how you can make yourself good at something through practicing it daily. And so that was a very formative part of my life. And it's led me over the years to have a real problem, for example, when people talk about talent. It just doesn't exist. There's no such thing. And I get sort of mildly irritated when somebody says, "Oh, you're very talented, Jess." No, I'm not. I've put a lot of, countless hours into learning all these things and practicing them in my own time, often into the early hours in the morning when everybody else is asleep. That's the way that actually getting good at things works. So that eventually led me into the performing arts. I stumbled in there and got very interested in physical acting, actually. I was involved in sort of slapstick comedy, working professionally in schools, and there I began set building. And that eventually took me across to France. I joined a well-renowned company over there and toured Europe in the theatre with a sort of circus cross theatre company, which was a very interesting experience. That took me across to India. We worked over there a bit. And then eventually into a marionette company where I started building automata machines and things for a while. And then that brought me up to 2018. I was living over there, Brexit happened and I came back, and then we got into lockdown. So that might, to a degree, I've just given you that little summary, just to give you a vague idea where I'm coming from in there. So by the kind of time I reached 40, my life had very much been marked by this non-specialised route. I'd changed my life pretty much every 2 years through that period, through my 20s and 30s. It was really exhausting to a degree. And in changing it that would entail changes of job, sometimes complete changes of work, also complete changes of social circle and social status, sometimes, in a way, as far as that thing goes. And obviously location and locality. So I had a lot of very varied experience, and nation as well, travelling between nations, meeting a lot of different people from very varied backgrounds. 1 minute being in some hoi polloi restaurant with renowned artists in Paris, and then the next minute out in some backstreet in Scarborough. And it was there was a real dynamic there, which to a degree gave me some confidence it taught me not to worry about any of those things, that actually these things, those very constraining social sort of constraints are illusionary, and they don't count for anything in reality. You get idiots and intelligent and good and bad people everywhere, in every walk of life, every demographic.
Are you one of the fair folk unseen? Does your hair sparkle green beneath the full moon? Do you dream of returning to that long-forgotten home beneath the mound? Well, here at Watson's Earthworks, we can make that dream a reality, and so return you to your rightful place, to dance and feast through a long nighttime of the soul, to stand adored beside the fairy queen in the timeless realm where the follies ways of man, and your ex-husband fall upon deaf ears forevermore. Call Watson's Earthworks now for more details.
Terms and conditions apply. The undersigned agrees to welcome representatives of the Fae into their home without notice, and to therein forfeit their firstborn in exchange for a designated changeling bairn of the Fairy Queen's choosing. A no-contact policy is unrevocable after transfer of the bairns. All and any magics placed upon the undersigned will be accepted without resistance. The Fairy Queen reserves the right to evict the undersigned from the mound without notice or possibility of appeal. Your statutory right not affected.
So yes, we've got up to lockdown, and for me, in 2020, and for me, as I think with a lot of people, it was a dividing line, we might say, in their life of understanding, coming up against some very, very demanding and shocking realities to a degree. I think that was a very curious period, because suddenly everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people were forced into a sort of introspective isolation involuntarily. Whereas before, those times had come voluntary for me, and I would end up going inside myself, sort of. At that time, everybody was forced into this isolation, but it was by outside forces. And for me, I remember at the time it occurring to me, it seemed so many people started examining the society around them, and I did the same. And for me, it was very curious, and I related it to that, because before, when I had gone off and been isolated on my own to do my thinking, it had been because I had things I wished to focus on, or I had things I needed to work out and sort out in myself. And yet then, it wasn't the case. I was actually really ready to be out and about. I'd come to a period in my life, I'd had a relationship breakup a couple of years before, issues, and I was at the stage that I really wanted to be going out and building a new life, and suddenly you were forced to go into isolation. And for me, it was like all that energy that would normally be looking inside was suddenly reflected out to look across what was going on in us, around us in society.
That is Cap's left hand whistle. That is Cap's right hand whistle.
A sheepdog's life is not all glamour. His real purpose is to help the shepherd manage the sheep on his own pasture. Tim sends Roy out to begin the gather.
Vote for me!
She's drifting a little bit to the right again, but gently does it. There's a challenge there from a defiant ewe. They've not given up fighting yet.
Forward!
Oh, there's a break on the right and on the left.
One second time! No, one!
Good afternoon. Earlier today, I presented the budget to the House of Commons. I want to be honest with you about the problems and our plan to fix them.
Farmer on his quad, he's just out of shot to the right, going off to check his sheep. So in there, the major thing which really deeply affected me and sent me off on this artistic journey and into megaliths on one side was this sudden, incredibly dogmatic, authoritarian way of thinking and conversing and regulating communication across society. And just saying that in many circles makes me a conspiracy theorist and write all the rest of it, but forgetting about all that crap. So yes, having been a lover of science all my life, I've always had a great interest in science, particularly in physics. I struggle when it gets to the mathematics. I can't really, it gets beyond me. But the concepts, the overriding principles, I had reasonable understanding of them in the way that the universe works in those principles, and from a young age, really, I had a great interest in how gravity and black holes and all these things, these various particles, neutrinos. I love neutrinos. They're amazing things. Gives an incredible So when lockdown came and suddenly we got this whole thing of believe the science, it absolutely pained me to hear, because obviously anybody with any sense knows it's not the right term, but you could say it's an oxymoron. To believe in science is completely, it's an utterly absurd statement, because the whole idea is science that is based on experimentation and definition of laws presiding over the forces and materials in the world, and to therefore belief doesn't come into it. It's into the gathering of data. That comes into the interpretation of science, but the actual operations, the actual measurements of science, they don't require belief. They are measurements. It's data. The belief comes in with the interpretation of it. There's a dividing line there between interpretation in hypothesis and theory of interpreting the data, but the data itself is not a matter of belief. And they insisted on this idiotic slogan of believe the science, and it made me immediately exceptionally suspect about anything they said, because I knew that anybody who said believe the science, I knew immediately anybody saying that had absolutely no real appreciation or understanding about what science was really about and how it actually functioned or should function, about the scientific method and all the rest of it. They had no real insight into it. If you say something as idiotic as believe the science, it's like saying on the other side, measure your faith or something like that. It's just a complete inversion. Turning science into a matter of faith. That's what they did, obviously. That's what belief in science means. It means you're turning science into a matter of faith, which is completely idiotic and completely goes against the whole premise of the scientific method and all the rest of it. So that I found extremely hard, and with it there came all of that fact-checking mentality, which was all absolutely based very clearly around making a plea to authority, which is a logical fallacy, the primary logical fallacy, by my understanding. That is a plea to authority, which you do when you try to win an argument by saying, I am an expert, and you don't actually lay out the logic of your reasoning. You just say, I am an expert, and you must therefore take what I say as read. I have the authority. Or you say, this is what an expert, this person with authority says, and therefore I do not, therefore your argument is invalid if you're not qualified like they are. And so the actual reasoning, the actual logic, the actual data, all of that stuff gets washed away and replaced by this, basically a battle for status. That's which leads to, it's an absolute logical fallacy, because the actual substance of the argument, the actual data, the actual real nitty-gritty of defining what's true and false goes thrown out of the window, and it just becomes a match of, yes, one person looking down their nose at the other, and drifts into ad hominem attacks, just slurring insults, saying this person doesn't have any real standing in this field, therefore we're not going to take in what they say, and not even going to read it. So that deeply, deeply bothered me at the time. Being particularly a kind of non-specialist, free thinker, exploratory thinker from day one, from my upbringing on the farm, it was in that world on the farm, it's all about you have to learn to do everything, and there's nobody there to stop you killing yourself by accident. There's nobody there, so you have to actually, and a lot of the operations that need doing, you have to innovate them on the spot. So it's all enforced this exploratory thinking, which I then learnt basically in watching that in lockdown. I learnt how unusual that had become. And it made me realise, seeing that so many people didn't appear to really to understand, firstly, how absurd that, and completely fell for that absurd statement, believe the science. They and made no effort to really explore the data themselves. They simply took those pleas to authority as wrote, and in doing so, it made me understand that there was something in my life and upbringing that was that had brought me to a very different place from the normative majority, who seemed to be perfectly willing to simply follow and do what they'd been told and not question, and actually got very, very outraged much of the time if they saw that being done, if they saw questions being asked. And he recoiled from it and ran from it and started throwing ad hominem attacks like conspiracy theorists and all the rest of it, simply for the very thing which a year or two before was what had been apparently revered. That is investigative journalism, for example, questioning things. Suddenly all of that evaporated, and it made me realise there that actually, yes, the dominating force there in society was simply following the social norm, and that those principles which I had myself kind of learnt, or I'd taken them on board, the principles of free inquiry and things, that those principles were completely absent, and that sometimes people had claimed to follow them, but they'd just done so, they just said that out of dogmatic reasoning. Again, they hadn't actually, the principles they hadn't understood underlying that, why they were saying it, why that was a good thing, they hadn't understood it. And so the moment something came along, and somebody came along, and the overriding consensus was, no, you don't do investigative stuff, that's the world of conspiracy theories, they just dropped it, because they had no real principled understanding of why that was important and what was likely to happen if you dropped it. Namely, you ended up in a situation where nefarious actors could just start manipulating what was taken to be true.
I love the lie and lie the love are hanging on, we push and shove. Possession is the motivation that is hanging up the goddamn nation. Looks like we always end up in a rut. Everybody now trying to make it real compared to what? Come on, baby. twisted children are killing frogs. Poor dumb rednecks rolling logs. Tired old ladies kissing dogs. I hate the human love of that stinking mud. I can't use it. Trying to make it real compared to what? Come on, baby, now. President, he's got his war. Folks don't know just what it's for. Nobody gives us a rhyme or reason. Have one doubt, they call it treason. With chicken feathers all without wonder. God damn it, trying to make it real compared to what? Suck it to me. Duck the wrath of God. Preachers filling us with fright. They all trying to teach us what they think is right. They really got to be some kind of nut. I can't use it. I'm trying to make it real compared to what? Bee and where's that honey? Where's my God and where's my money? Unreal values, a crass distortion. Unwed mothers need abortion. Kind of brings to my old young King Tut. He did it now, trying to make it real compared to what?
beneath that, to my eye, was a belief, a complete falsehood, but an illusion that the questions were, at the high level, answered. That they knew what was correct and what was not, the experts. That there was no questions up there. And that therefore, in fact, we had pretty much we knew everything pretty much. If we just had to choose to listen to the right people, and if we did, therefore we knew everything. Science, in that mindset, was put forward to have close to omnipotent understanding. There were no real questions. There was no real possibility of it getting it wrong, of there being a huge vista of unknowns just beyond perception that might throw everything into question. As a real lover of science, that has always been, I've been aware of that. That's what the great pleasure of an interest in science is, the very fact that it is constantly evolving and constantly turning over, and what is thought to be known is getting rewritten and adapted as new information comes in, and new innovation and thought comes up. So by them somehow giving across this illusion that task was pretty much complete, that there were no questions, there was no need to debate anymore, we knew the final outcome pretty much, apart from a few niggling little things out there in the realm of theoretical physics or something, but otherwise we knew it all. That deeply troubled me, because I'd learned through my own learning, through being an autodidact, from teaching myself new skills, that the primary foundation of learning fast, which is what I learnt to do in learning lots of different things, if you want to learn fast, the first step, as they say in Zen, is to empty one's cup. In other words, to open oneself to take in new information, new possibilities, and to look at them openly. And therein you open yourself to that new information, and you can begin the learning process. Whereas if your cup is full, if you think you know it all, very obviously, there's no need to explain it, a know-all learns nothing. We all know that. They don't like being challenged. They've given themselves a self-important status. They've decided they know it all, and therefore they can't be proven wrong. They'll dismiss anything because they're primarily trying to hold that high status of knowing it all. Have you ever heard of a sort of psychological condition? It's not a condition really, but something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect, by my understanding, is an anomaly when somebody is too ignorant to understand the limitations of their perceptions, and too ignorant, you might say, to see the unanswered questions within what they believe to be true. They don't have the intelligence to see the limitations of their own intelligence. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. It happens a lot. You'll find it. It's why the classic they say it's hard to win an argument with an intelligent person, it's impossible to win an argument with an idiot, because the idiot can't reason through their argument isn't built on reason, and therefore you can't win the argument by reason, because that's not how they think. They've just got a set thing that they're holding is right. Well, that status quo that started playing out during COVID had all of those hallmarks to me, and it filled me with dread, because to my eye it was going in exactly the opposite direction to intelligent debate, firstly, and more importantly, to any possibility of actually defining what is true and what is false. Once you start censoring people, you cannot communicate. Once you start censoring questions, you will never know if you're wrong. Obviously. As an artist as well, I have a deep, it's one of the hardest things I find today is that artists themselves, they should be the first people to go hell for leather against censors. The artists are the ones that get locked up, that get sent to Siberia. The ones who challenge the current status quo. Artists, they should, by rights, they should, if they've got any understanding of their role, they should be the first people, and the position they're in, they should be the first people to challenge those who censor. And the lack of that movement really shocked me at the time during lockdown, and remains to a degree. I find it shocking that artists are so unaware of their history, of the history of that role, of political prisoners and all the rest of it. So often they were artists, and they're so ignorant of that they don't fight against, and they'll actually support censorship. Anyway, let's not go there. It drives me round the bend. It shouldn't just be the right-winger. Not that I've really got anything against the right-winger, and I may be one myself, who knows. But yeah, it shouldn't be. It should be the lefty arty blah-de-blah should be the first to push back against any kind of censorship. And again, the lack of that for me just really illustrates the lack of any understanding of underlying principles. They're just going with the social norms, like sheep in the mist.
There's so much racism and everything,
which is
just
tragic.
dividing us.
Going to pause here, check that the camera's still working, smoke a roll up, and then come back and continue.
There is one teaching that is very much forgotten, or it is probably ignored in many cases. Which is to say that you are not to be a person that is oversensitive. Don't be easily offended. Is what they say it. It will ruin you. If you are listening to something being told or being taught, and somehow you don't agree with it, and you're going to be offended by what you don't agree with, in that situation, then you are not going to learn, because it might be something that is the first step to understanding greater things. And so there are many dangers that in the traditional teaching about do not be offended. Don't be like coyote. Don't be that way. Understand what is being taught. Those are the things that we are told.
No, listen. I really enjoy going around finding
fellow far-right white supremacists.
No, but I'm just... Right, listen to this, right? We were talking about porridge. That's actually the reason why I got on this story. So, there's a story about my friend Derek Carroll, and he actually reminds me of you a little bit. Kind of has, he had a ginger beard. He was living in his boat, a bit of a wild character. So he was living in Norway, and he was at an ancient stone circle, just like the one we're at now. And he said he had like some sort of a vision where he had this idea, let's say an inspiration idea, to bring a fire to Ireland. And one evening he was sitting on a pier in Norway by the water, and this pirate ship just sailed in towards him. This big black pirate ship with like red sails, and like this big burly man, like the perfect description of a pirate, came out. And he was like, was there a fire burning here at the harbour? And Dara was like, no, it's just me sitting here. And the guy was like, I could swear I seen smoke. And he came in because he was scared something happened. But there was no fire, and Dara got talking to him and told him that he had this idea that he was going to bring a fire back to Ireland. Long story short, he ended up buying the boat off the pirate. And the boat now was like really special to this pirate. But he could see Dara had this vision and this purpose with this fire.
When was that?
This was not last summer. I think 2 summers ago.
In 2020?
It was during COVID.
That was exactly when my obsession with fire started. Well, I had exactly the same. That's very strange. I think that whole everything that was happening then, the complete removal from being locked in, and it just kind of cast my eyes back to, went searching for some kind of root of civilization, feeling like it, because it really felt like society was sort of, like the foundation was crumbling apart, and people were just getting so, everybody was drifting apart, and it was that for me, the fire, gather it like the fundamental place of gathering around the fire. It's like, it's interesting that another fella had that similar
same time,
like just his mind went back to fire as well.
Yeah, to elements, he was saying as well, like the elements, keeping the elements alive, and like using the elements to like sail, sailing you need the wind, like fire, the heat, the water.
Yeah, it's all foundational stuff.
You don't trust me.
No.
Then there's nothing I can do to help.
You want to help me?
Certainly. I can see to it that you never have to leave this jungle.
How could you do that?
Oh, I have my own subtle little ways. But first, you must trust me.
I don't trust anyone anymore.
I don't blame you. I'm not like those so-called fair-weather friends of yours. You can believe in me.
Equality for everyone.
To continue.
Raising the flag for
yes, having paused. So to continue. In seeing that landscape of people following, doing what they were told without question throughout lockdown, and it continues today. I had some personal experiences there wherein in that resulting despondency, dread, depression to a certain extent that overtook me in the bedsit I was then living in, whilst watching the city going mad around me in that way, literally. I remember going to sit in a park. I would go and sit in a park on occasion, and it was incredibly shocking, I found, to see at the beginning completely off the top of my head. At the beginning, you could, maybe 1 in 1,000 people who walked past. Prior to that, you could see that they were a little bit mad. 1 in 1,000 people would walk past talking to themselves, muttering, or something of that nature. And as lockdown progressed, by the end of it, I remember sitting on that park bench and being utterly distraught to see that 1 in 50 people or so, or more, were walking past that bench, talking to themselves, muttering, looking basically like they had lost their mind. Farmer's coming back. So in that, I started looking for other people who seeking out for some solace in finding other people who saw what I saw. And it amazed me. I had a few instances where I met some bod in a shop, or I remember one particular day I went into a shop and there was a security guard standing there at the entrance to a supermarket. I think it might have been Poundland or something in Sheffield. And he was stood there with his mask on, and I walked in with mine, and we began talking. And anybody on my side of that divide will know this. There was a sort of feeling out took place of seeing whether we were free to talk our minds, or whether we had to submit to that overriding dogma with the other, for fear of them becoming disturbed at the questions and thoughts I was having. And I learnt there that I just took the plunge, took a risk and said something. And I saw immediately this response in him, his shoulders dropped, metaphorically speaking, and there was a great sigh of relief I saw in him, and he suddenly changed and started talking his mind and said, "Oh God, yes, I can't take this. This is a nightmare to watch," and all the rest of it. What's happening? And I learned at that instant that in my own little way, I had the power to lead in a way, that all it took for him to speak his mind was a very subtle invitation from me. It just took a tiny step forward for me to say, I'm not going to judge you. If you have disagreements, if you have questions, you're free to speak with me. And it taught me at that point that I had to some degree the power to lead. It made me go away and think about that. And I found myself thinking that at the age of 45, well, I wasn't so much younger than those people leading the country. It made me think about the stages of life, and it taught me that in the position I was in, with the oversight I had then gained through my life experience, that I actually had some things that I knew that might actually be important to share with the next generation and with those around me. And that if I didn't, if I resisted, because I knew to a degree that I had more sense than some of those people I watched on the television, who'd spent all their lives in that media social circle, drinking in their wine bars in London and all the rest of it, and had very little real experience. Although they were in that position of apparent authority, they actually had very little life experience outside that the confines of their social circle that they lived in. And it made me understand there through that that experience suddenly gave me this feeling, well, who do we allow to rule us? Do I simply allow them to dictate to the next generation, to those around us, to those around me, what is right and wrong? Or do I step forward and speak a little bit myself? And that experience that I described in that shop with that security guard, and there were others too, it gave me the confidence and understanding that actually all it really takes to lead is an invitation. That in that position, what I wished to promote, all I had to do was invite people to be honest, to let them know that was indeed acceptable. That self-censoring around me was not what I called for. So yes, that sudden, it was rather an epiphany to me. Because obviously there's all those absurd questions of, oh, you can't, how terribly arrogant, but it wasn't at all. I suddenly understood that no, it's not that I will tell people what to do, that I'm in any position of authority, quite the reverse, but I can lead simply by inviting people to think differently and to think for themselves. That was a real position of leadership, to my eyes. To empower in your own little way, and that it takes hardly anything. It's a nothing. All it takes is a few words to break through that spell that tells us we mustn't say what we think because we might offend, or we might be thought foolish or wrong, or any of the rest of it. That was a seminal moment in that journey for me. Now, to link that with what I was talking about before, about that dogmatic thought, the presiding lilt towards dogmatic thought and away from individual critical thinking. Just to illustrate that division, somebody I've followed for a while, listened to a lot of his talks for a while, called EDI Jester, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Jester. It's a fellow with some quite interesting thoughts. I watched an interview with him, Benjamin Boyce, in which he described, it really illustrated something perfectly. On the one hand, I had this it illustrated something in the realm as well of the specialist versus the non-specialist, or versus there's different names for it, Renaissance man, jack of all trades is another thing, word that's used often quite derogatorily. Universal man, whatever. He described, just to illustrate that concept, the difference being, if you take a child to a zoo, do you walk around and tell them what everything is? Get them to memorize the names of all the animals or whatever? Or do you arrive at the zoo and say to the kid, right, you go off and explore the zoo yourself and come back and tell me what you've seen. Tell me what you've learned, discovered. And that, to me, is the difference between dogmatic thinking and between learning by rote, basically, or learning by your own exploration two very different mindsets. And to my mind, our whole culture now has been built around learning by rote, very obviously. If you look at our education systems, it's all built, the examination process, all the rest of it, it's all about revising and memorizing previously formulated so-called facts and parroting them back. It's not about developing the ability to reason for oneself. That's not something which is a part of our education system built on the Prussian model, etc., apparently. So
you think you're gonna live your life alone, in darkness and seclusion? Yeah, I know. You've been out there and tried to mix with the animals, and it just left you full of humiliated confusion. But the feeling of loneliness never leaves you. It haunts you everywhere you go. And then you meet me, and your whole world changes. Because everything I say is everything you've ever wanted to hear. So you drop your defenses, and you drop all your fears. And you're so busy feeling good that you never question why things are going so well. You wanna know why? 'Cause I'm a liar! Yeah, I'm a liar! I'll tear your mind out, I'll burn your soul, I'll turn you into me, I'll turn you into me, 'cause I'm a liar, a liar, a liar, a liar. I'll hide behind a smile and understanding eyes. And I'll tell you things that you already know, so you can say, I really identify with you so much. I'll come to you like an affliction, but I'll leave you like an addiction. You'll never forget me. You wanna know why? 'Cause I'm a liar. Yeah, I'm a liar. I'll rip your mind out. I'll burn your soul. I'll turn you into me. I'll turn you into me. 'Cause I'm a liar, a liar. Liar, 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 liar. I don't know why I feel the need to lie and cause you so much pain. Maybe it's something inside. Maybe it's something I can't explain. 'Cause all I do is mess you up and lie to you. I'm a liar. Oh, I'm a liar. But if you give me just one more chance, I swear I will never lie to you again. Because now I see the destructive power of a lie. They're stronger than truth. I can't believe I ever hurt you. I swear I will never lie to you again. Please, just give me one more chance. I will never lie to you again. I swear. I will never tell a lie. I will never tell a lie. No. No. Sucker! Sucker! Oh, sucker! I am a liar! Yeah! I am a liar! Yeah! I like it! I feel good! Oh, I am a liar! Yeah! I this.
Now then, here we're getting into the nitty-gritty of my artwork and where it began. In there, that whole picture led me, this whole Dunning-Kruger effect, this concept of being, of us knowing everything, all of that, it led me to look and suddenly start thinking about the unknown. Because in that picture, one of the great truths, I think, of existence is we can never know how much we know. By definition, you cannot quantify the unknown. You cannot know what is waiting for you there. By definition, it is unknown, the unknown. So you cannot, with any real intelligence, compare or quantify how much you know versus how much you do not know. And personally speaking, I think it's always best to err on the side of the chances are there is a huge amount, particularly in a universe stretching billions of light years across. The chances are there is far, far, far more yet to learn than what we already know. Look into history, we have a reasonably detailed account of events over the last 2,000 years, approximately. That extends back maybe another 1,000 or 2,000 years into a certain degree, in a very vague outline of what happened during the Bronze Age. Once we get back into this Neolithic Stone Age, when they were building dolmens and things, we have next to no knowledge, real knowledge, of who the people were. There is no writing, there are no records, so we are completely, more or less completely in the dark as to who those people actually were, how they thought, what their societies were like. We have very, very, very scant information. And so once we get into that field, it's almost all interpretation. If we go further back, if we get back into a field like the record of human development through different hominid species, for example, thing I often think about and mention when discussing this matter. Take, for example, there's an ancient hominid, Denisovan man, and we have, I think it's a bit of a fragment of a jawbone or a little finger or something, I can't remember now, but we have a fragment of one piece of bone to account for the entire species, for their entire legacy. Others similarly, Homo erectus man, we have, it's a minuscule, enough to fill a couple of glass cabinets. You look at the data points of the spread of people, those peoples across the globe, and they're so few and far apart. You've got 10 sites, if we're lucky, to plot a migration happening over thousands of years. 10 skeletons discovered to plot thousands and thousands and thousands of years of intricate human history. So we know there is far, 99.9999% is a complete unknown. There is nothing there for us. That's one field, for example, to show how much we need to get over this idea that we're in any position to categorically state what was going on then and pretend we're in a position of authority. Those who do so, they really need a kick up their arse in my because it's a complete illusion. There is so much room for surprises in that realm particularly. Add to that, for example, the fact that the sea levels have risen 120 metres over the last 20,000 years, washing over nearly all of the areas of possible major population during that time. It's all under the ocean and again, the entire oceans, we have so much yet to... We haven't even accurately mapped the ocean floor. We haven't been down there in the vast majority of it. We haven't excavated the vast majority. It's tiny, minuscule percentage of the planet's surface has been excavated. Tiny percentage. So there is so much room there for whacking great unknowns to come jumping out and slapping us in the face and completely changing the way we look at it. And if we insist, we will not learn. If we insist that that's not the case, we're just walking around with our hands in it, with our fingers in our ears, going blah 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 blah. I'm not going to listen. I know it all. Yeah, Dunning-Kruger. So I began thinking about that, and it struck me we would be far better off, I think. Do you not think? If we spent more time focusing on what we don't know, above and beyond what we do know. All this fact-checking and categorizing of previously so-called defined facts, we spend so much time on that. That's where all the focus is, in elevating experts and regurgitating these facts, which most of the time the people who are regurgitating them don't even understand themselves, because they haven't been the ones to actually do the thinking and the research which gets to it. They're just regurgitating some which may as well be an abstract statement to them. They're just regurgitating it. So you may as well not know it at all if you don't understand where the actual reasoning behind it, to my mind. So, wouldn't it be better, isn't it better, instead to think about, what if we spent more time promoting and thinking about the unknowns? In there I had the idea for a project which, it's a pet idea of mine that I would love to try and do, but I think it would have to be a website, something like Wikipedia. I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to build an encyclopedia of the unknown? So when you came across something that wasn't known, you came across a question that somebody hadn't answered, that there was no answer to, you put it into this encyclopedia, this encyclopedia of the unknown, so you could go there and look at it and find this huge, colossal catalogue of all the things we didn't know. Obviously, again, it's a rather impossible thing, but you could at least have the questions there. I think I'd spend a lot of time there. One of my thoughts there is that in the unknown, there are no experts in the unknown. It's a key thing. So if you're interested in freedom, if you're interested in free thought, well, there's something to think about. There are no experts in the unknown, and that's very telling to me. In a society that's so focused on revering and elevating the authority of experts, in a society where those rising to the top, actually it's all built around becoming an authority to hold sway over others. Power games, in a way. They're so dominating that trend, that mindset. That's how you get your publisher and all the rest of it. Peer review and all the rest. Well, on the other side, completely on the other side, you can't do that in the unknown. There are no experts. There are no lists of previously determined facts. There are no lists of those things which are previously determined to be correct and incorrect. And so in that realm, it is purely the merit of the individual's reasoning, the strength of their ideas, that counts. That dreaded word, the meritocracy in some circles. The unknown is where you find the ultimate meritocracy. There is nothing else which will make you stand apart. If you are examining or trying to understand an unknown, you are reliant upon the substance, or you should be, upon the substance of your arguments, the power of your logic, the possibility of the enlightenment that you offer there. There is no authority in the unknown.
Catch me if you can.
Welcome to the world of a little man with big ideas. Join me on a promise of the great unknown. For curiosity untamed. For a vision without fear. I have the power! For those truths beyond the safe zone.
So I have been led in that direction. That's largely why I have an interest in prehistory. Because for me, I'm interested in the mental games. You might think it's self-indulgent, but it is. For me, it's the problems I enjoy. The thought experiments, the journeys of discovery that I go on personally, and hopefully share with you to some degree, but those journeys of reflection to try, and therein I learn to summon my own reasoning, question my own logic, and build on my ability to understand, to test my ideas, but overall to test my intelligence, as opposed to simply looking and Googling things. I often don't do that, and it's something to be aware of actually in films, that sometimes I might place a question that has in fact already, doubtless, most questions that people have already attempted to answer them, and I don't actually go out looking for everybody else's answers. Because in a field like with the dolmens, I don't want to simply acquire and repeat what anyway you can Google in 2 seconds yourself. It's a con. I don't want to con you in that way of simply, yes, Googling some dolmen and then just parroting off what everybody else thinks about it. In that way, with those films in Ireland, Megaliths of the Emerald Isle, I took that to an extreme, in as much as I developed that pipe-smoking character who simply walked around the object of interest, smoking his pipe, and you could look through in the first person through his eyes and simply look at the thing in detail. That in itself was something I noticed in watching people at those sites. So many people, I would be there making a film, and even if I wasn't, I'd be there for a long time and take a really detailed look around it. And so often, I discovered this through my life, you would see some people turning up and they would take a picture with their mobile phone, that old cliche, and walk up to it, glance at something from one angle, and they'd leave. And I'd be left there thinking, my God, you've just travelled all the way here. You're standing in front of something 5,000 years old. You've taken a picture, looked at it for 2 minutes and walked off. What is that? Where is your curiosity? Why did you even bother coming in the first place? So part of that as well for me was, in seeing that, I thought, well, instead of parroting all of these facts about it, maybe I can actually give a little... If I can help the audience in anything, it might be in guiding them how to actually look at something. That is a skill in itself. Actually promoting, in actually encouraging to actually look carefully, to walk around something, to look at it from different angles, as the artist does. To see what the whole thing looks like, compare it to the skyline, see where what aligns, what doesn't, what's the negative space, what's the positive, what are all these things, how do they merge and blend around the thing, that around the dolmen, for example. Really look at it, take it in, and in that you can examine those things that you've read and heard about them. Do they actually appear to be true or false? Do you think, is there a trace of a mound? Well, and if not, yes, what, etc. I'm just going to look at my notes, because where are we? Now that is a fantastic wind noise. It's hard to record the wind. And I've managed to park my van at a special angle. It's not really hitting the van, or it's hitting the back, but I think it's some cables on a telegraph pole outside. I'm overlooking Dinner's Cross. Dinner's Cross, is that right? Yeah. Yeah, where I was. What a wind! That's nice. I had a one wind recording, but I got it off the internet. That's much nicer. I'll be using that in my films. Listen to that. It's proper. Oh, what a wind. I like wind. So, in there, I began trying to develop a different way of an alternative route or from that very dogmatic way of thinking. I was looking for another mode, another discipline, and I suddenly realised that it was staring me in the face. Yes, I thought, well, I'm not gonna. These aren't the films I want to make. They're not science films. They're not about science. They're not. Well, they are to a degree. They're about history, but they're not. It's not the I'm not the historian. They're about archaeology, but I'm not the archaeologist. What actually am I? What are these works? And how do I escape that, particularly online, that whole burgeoning kind of mass of people who are ready to jump in and say, you're not qualified. Was I qualified? I wasn't qualified. I had no qualification to guide you around historical sites. And then it just suddenly occurred to me, well, yes, I do. In as much as that I'm an artist. And that's what really hit me. It suddenly occurred to me, well, in that search for another alternative aspect that escapes all those qualifiers, all that plea to authority business, all of that censorious, authoritarian thought regulated, that so heavily regulated world, it suddenly occurred to me, well, the art, that is the role, that's the alternative that has filled that role for millennia. Art, the artist, is someone who freely examines a muse and puts it forward to their audience to debate and explore. And the artist puts forward their subjective experience of that thing for the examination of the audience, for them to draw their own conclusions. At least that is one form of art, and a very important part of it, of the discipline of art, to my mind. In the little bit of training I did in the dramatic arts, the primary lesson in the theatre, which comes from a legacy going right back to the ancient Greeks, their first theatres, they were places of debate, of political debate. They were the town square where people gathered to debate, and the performers told stories which challenged and brought up conflicts, whether they be emotional conflicts, human conflicts. They were brought up so the audience then was challenged to decide on whose side they were. Something being lost, terribly lost, in the artistry of today in that world. There's this thing crept in again, that no, the artist is there to tell people how to think, what is right and wrong, to conclude everything. But the role there, by my understanding, no, it's not. You're not there to conclude the argument, you're there to lay out the argument. Just the same in journalism. We're again getting that very similar thing. Real journalism, it lays out both sides. In a political argument, for example, it will lay out what the left thinks and what the right thinks, what their reasoning is behind both sets of thinking, behind both mindsets, behind both the issues that they're concerned about, and put them forward openly for the reader or viewer to draw their own conclusions from. It respects the intelligence of the viewer in that manner. So I was taken into trying to promote that, yes. Trying to place the unknown before you, the viewer, to a degree. That's a large thing which underlies some of my megalithic films. Look at that, beautiful suns come out outside. There's a view, isn't there? And the birdie behind me thinks as much too.
child of ice and fire. Does the blood of the forgotten shaman flow through your veins? Are you not ready to face death quite yet? Want to carry on living? We have just the right plan for your needs. Join Mysterious Apocalypse Man's adventures, full of life and joy, and leave the concrete jungle now to roam free through the woodlands of the apocalyptic realm. Mysterious Apocalypse Man.
So I want to here, I think, go a little bit into, lay out some intricacies of my, of these artistic intricacies. Again, what's behind my work, just for those interested. There are a few things which I often wish to mention. One of those, just on a little aside, there's a very, for me, a real lack of heroes in the modern world. In our, there's a trend to elevate the mediocre, the normal. I don't particularly like it. It's a very, I think it comes with the kind of equality rhetoric. It comes with wanting to give everybody a trophy. Accepting mediocrity, basically. And trying to, yes, that whole way of thinking, which I think personally is quite destructive. And we've seen the destructiveness of it in the arts, because I think today if you get a character like David Bowie, who was a great hero of mine for a while, and who was truly exceptional in the pop world, for example. You get a character like that, I think today they wouldn't be accepted, because today we want the boy or the girl next door so that everybody can feel they've got a chance to get in on, to get a slice of the polystyrene cake that is celebrity worship. And so that was also, that comes into my films on occasion to a degree. I just wanted to mention it. My channel trailer, for example, I'm aware there's that set of people who see any kind of attempt to project, to create a hero. They see it as, they don't have the subtlety of thought to understand that the creator is well aware that it is a fictional representation. Now, as I perhaps mentioned before, as with this video, you're not meeting me here. You're meeting me trying to formulate, partly to create something which you'll want to watch to a degree. And though I am sharing my own thoughts, it's being formulated, the music behind it, all the rest of it is created to make it a experience which is more approachable, more entertaining, more interesting than I perhaps am in real life. And so in creating a hero, in creating a persona, it's not that I'm attempting to lie, it's simply for myself as well. I was discussing this with a friend recently. I have actually, after coming out of lockdown, when I was in that tent in Cornwall, living there for 8 months through a winter, there I was being challenged deeply in my personal life by a legal dispute over a property I owned in France. It was a very dark time. And I actually, creating a hero, projecting the very best that I had to offer and filtering myself in that manner, was a great, it did me a lot of good in, you might say, creating my own hero, creating of myself in a way, something that only exhibited the best of me, what I had to offer. There's that old phrase, if you can't do it, mimic it until you can. And in ways I was doing that then. Because in my private time I was tormented by what was going on elsewhere. And so in creating this heroic, stoic figure, I looked at him, at the creation that I'd created on the screen, and it gave me, I became that eventually, to a degree, in my own self, through having created it from out of a figment of the pixels and sound bites. I created this image of a character who had that stoicism, and then I started to embody that myself.
You to wave your finger, you must have been out your head. I hold deep in muddy waters, you practically raised the dead. Rob the grave to snow the cradle, then burn the evidence down. Soapbox house of cause and glass, so don't go tossing your stones around. You must have been high. You must have been high.
And so in creating this heroic, stoic figure, I looked at him, at the creation that I'd created on the screen, and it gave me, I became that eventually, to a degree, in my own self, through having created it from out of a figment of the pixels and sound bites. I created this image of a character who had that stoicism, and then I started to embody that myself. So in forming a hero, I was aware that there were other people who was doing it too, because I was very aware that there were other people who were, many people suffering likewise in similar positions, who may not find their way out of it, and who may not have stumbled across that particular possibility. And so I wanted to share that hero I'd created for myself in ways. I thought, well, he may be of use to them too. To complete this, was to give a more... There's been a lot of rather serious stuff there regarding politics and all the rest of it. Things going on out there. Speak a little bit about on a more personal level. One of my interests in the ancients, particularly, I'm very interested in the way that they thought, and it is very clearly an area that you can never prove. Behind that, I think it's very clearly obvious. Well, if we go back to the Neolithic and before, they had fully developed minds physically. So they had the same ability, intelligence-wise, as we have. That's quite, to me, that's demonstrated. For example, when we look at cave paintings, those beautiful, stunningly beautiful cave paintings found in France, for example, sadly, they show, to me, when I look at them, I have the same thing when I'm drawing. There's a great desire to bring into being a perfect form, to illustrate the perfection of a dream inside your mind and to project it into reality. A certain kind of alchemy there. Being in the zone, in that place when you're trying to do that, when you're trying to create a perfect line, a perfect curve, trying to create a perfect form. That aspiration, being in the zone there. To me, that's very clearly that it's where sort of genius happens, in a way. You become more intelligent when your senses are fizzing and your mind is fizzing with its immersion in that world. To me, it's very clearly evident that those people painting in those caves were in that state, and they had all the intricacy and subtleties of that intelligence, that aspiration working in their minds, trying to create this perfect representation in these incredibly simple yet perfectly formed, beautiful animal paintings. So to me, I see great intelligence in the artistry and creative urge coming through from that, we might say, primal mind, human mind. There is great sophistication in it, in that way. Just as much sophistication as is in the contemporary human wishing to manifest something beautiful which is inside their mind. But something which in there has built and has come into my films to a degree is, I think that they I suspect today, I don't think that they were actually exactly the same as us. It's often said, or it's sort of, there's one of these polarized arguments with whether primitive versus exactly like us, and I don't think it's either. I think, for me, I strongly suspect, in my purely conjectural way, but looking back and immersing myself in that area for a while, I get a strong impression, I think it follows, that they had minds which were much more graphical in their nature. They had intellects which were much more graphical. What I mean by that is today, with our ever increasing specialization through the last few thousand years, we've become incredibly literary in the formulation of concepts, in the way we think. We think in this incredibly literary way. We think in words and phrases, and we're always talking in words and phrases and communicating in these, descriptive, literary manner. Whereas I think that more primal mind, those primal intellects, I think they had all the intelligence and subtlety there, but that actually I see a much more graphical intellect, in as much as they dealt, and I think it's very clearly evidenced that they clearly used symbols, and those symbols created analogies for stories, peoples, for certain symbols may have represented certain groups of people or activities, all the rest of it. So I think they actually may have directly thought and equated concepts in symbolic forms. And whereas today we translate symbols constantly, we take a symbol, and if we want to learn about it, we translate the symbol into a whole paragraph of words. And I think that's a modern occurrence that's flawed, and will never really give an understanding. In its very nature, it's taking, it's flawed in its translation, in as much as the translation itself renders that symbol, turns it into something it is not. It turns it into a concrete definition, a literary definition, and that's not what it is. It's a symbol. And I've thought about this a lot through my art, that I think symbols, I've started using symbols and interweaving them, for example, the dragon with my films. And I think that in that symbolic world, in playing with concepts that are summated in symbols, that creates a very different landscape of thought from those clearly defined, regulated literary descriptions. So in dealing with symbols, there is a lot of space there. They float in a space in our minds with that degree of uncertainty I mentioned before, which I think is very important, and so gives room for drawing links between them. That gives room for a great deal of creativity and new thought. Because it doesn't turn everything everything isn't constrained within these descriptions. So in that way, I think symbolic, graphical thought and the exploration of ideas through those graphical, symbolized means of communicating those ideas is much more, it gives room for so much more creativity. And it keeps things indefined to a certain extent. It forces the viewer again to draw their own conclusions rather than stating them and giving them a nice descriptive literary paragraph that they can memorize and parrot off. If you want to talk about the meanings you saw in a set of symbols, you have to, by nature, interpret it yourself. So I think that's part of the reason why symbols have become, I find that very interesting. And so in my films as well, it's something I kind of feel fits with that ancient with the ancient subject matter that comes into my films a lot, the dolmens and things, part of that way I've worked in those symbolic forms and things, it's because I actually think that that is the way perhaps that their intellects worked to a degree. Obviously that's evidenced in religion and all the rest of it to a degree. But there's so much analogy and metaphor, and again with this dogmatic way of thinking today, it's very poorly equipped for the subtlety of understanding those forms. So we get these ridiculous arguments occurring where people read what is very clearly meant to be an analogy for something which is very clearly meant to be an analogy for a spiritual journey, for example. And they say, well, this clearly can't be true because, yes, like the feeding of the 5,000 or whatever, turning water to wine, these things very clearly were meant as analogies that had a meaning then beyond the immediate journeys of the mind and soul and all the rest of it. So yes, I try to bring that into my films. To wrap that up, lastly, there was an amazing story I saw in video I saw of a fellow who went into a temple in India. I'm not a great sort of follower of Indian philosophy or anything. I'm British. Just by the by. That's a great fashion for that at the minute. And has been last century. That exoticism. They've got all the same problems we have, in my mind. This fellow went into a temple and there was a sculpture there atop this little pillar. And the sculpture was maybe 3 or 4, it changed which way you look at it, number of human forms entwined in a sort of ball. And this sculpture, have you ever seen those pictures, I'm sure you have, where when you look at them, if you look at them one way, you see one thing, and if you slightly change your mindset or look at it in another way, it's something else entirely. One way it might be 2 people kissing, the other way it might be a vase, for example. The negative space, the silhouette, and can flip between the foreground and background. So you get 2 different images. Well, this sculpture upon this pillar in this temple was of a similar nature in that, and he described, at least the person who was making this video, he described how, to his understanding at least, this sculpture had been made so that it appeared differently and was and people at different stages in their life, people of different ages, would see something different in these entwined human forms. And so somebody, a child looking at it, would see a mother holding a baby with the father behind them suckling a baby, the mother suckling the baby, the father behind entwined. They would, with the child, they would see something like that in this sculptural form. An adolescent might look at it and see, with their dirty little minds, might see 2, a man and a woman entwined in coitus. A middle-aged person might see I can't remember all the different stages. It went, and maybe an elderly person would see somebody dying and their soul going into the underworld or something like that. It was these, so at each point in life you looked upon this sculpture and you saw something different, and it was designed in that way so that it gave something to everybody but had a different meaning to them all. And maybe only the old person would actually see the whole sense in it. I thought that was it really struck me that as an incredibly, I loved the sophistication of that. And it really got me thinking about the way of, that you can create multiple layers in one artwork that speak to different people who are at different levels of understanding. And I try to do that through my films to a degree, as far as I'm capable, in as much as I layer in, for example, sometimes there are personal stories layered in which may be evident to people who've been through something similar but won't be really noticed to those who don't. There are little hints given to inspire certain thoughts through symbolism or other things. And yet that's not fully mapped out. I think in that, for me, it's with that realm of not trying to get everybody to understand everything all the time, and as well not giving these perfectly concluded sort of black and white statements all the time. Because I think as well there are times in our life where certain understandings, having certain things explained to us, will be meaningless because we simply don't have the foundations to really understand the importance or the meaning of it. This is why it's absurd today. We shouldn't have teenagers telling older people what to do because they haven't got the life experience to understand a lot of things. So that comes into my films a lot. I think different layering things, and in that way I'm hopefully successfully or not, but at least trying to some degree to make something which will entertain, which might just be purely entertaining on one level, but which to somebody who's looking in a different way and who has certain understanding, they will be able to see and draw some deeper conclusions. Yes, I find that a very, very inspiring, interesting sort of area to explore.
Penny for your thoughts. What do you reckon?
Well, that brings us almost to the climax of our trials. Will you please do the honour?
I've made this, in one sense, as something of a director's commentary to introduce the film I've been working on for the last few months. I've been giving it a rest for the last month, actually, because I've got rather stuck with it. But I want to publish it, and I think I might attach it here. I might publish them all separately also. But for those of you interested, I want to have this lead into the film I've been making, which will hopefully actually put what I've been talking about and actually show you now what all that amounts to, if anything. So yeah, this film is very much about in ways, it illustrates my personal journey since lockdown, the journey of a wandering man. It begins with a translation of The Wanderer, which is actually an untitled poem, which was found in the Exeter documents. I can't remember the word for it. But it's thought to be probably a poem which came from an oral tradition stretching back probably around at least 1,000 years. And I found it amazing because I really identified with a lot of what he speaks about in my journey over the last few years. It just goes to show 1,000 years apart, people are still having the same experiences. We go through the same journeys. Yes, it goes round and round. So here for you, I hope you enjoy it. It's a half-hour long film. Come back and watch it if you don't have the patience. It's a proper film. The Many-Faced Wanderer. Shall leave you there. Till later. Thanks for watching. Stay dangerous, folks.
Cause we stay dangerous. You ain't catch a body, you can't bang with us. Check your resume, you wanna hang with us. They say they want war, keep that thing with us. Stay dangerous.
Always the lonely one endures, his mind anxious, awaiting God's mercy. Far roaming the rolling waves, stirring the ice-cold sea bare-handed, travelling his exile's path, fate unchanging. Thus spoke the earth-stepper, recalling miseries of slaughter, enemies and dear kinsmen cut down. Alone at each dawn I must lament my sorrows,
There are none now living to whom I would dare plainly express my heart. I know it is true that a man of real value must bind his thoughts fast, must keep close his heart's treasures, must think as he wants. But my weary heart cannot resist fate, nor my troubled mind provide aid. Therefore, as those who are eager for glory often bind sadness to their breast, so have I had to hold close counsel, careworn, far from friends, deprived of homeland. I must bind these thoughts with chains. It has been thus since long ago, when I had to bury my liege, had to cover my ring-giver with dark earth, and then, dejected, forever leave that place. I went then winter sad over the waves. Homesick I far sought a lord, a mead hall that I might know as my own, a place for my friendless self to be known, to be comforted and enticed with pleasures. The wise know how cruel it is to have grief as one's only companion. He who treads the exile's path with frozen spirit lives no gilded life, possesses no worldly bounty. He remembers the hall brothers of his youth, and his gift-giving gold friend who would entertain and feast. Happiness now all lost. He knows now he has foregone all his friendly lord's wise teachings. Then sorrow and sleep combine together, and the wretched loner is held fast by thoughts of his lord. It seems that he embraces him and kisses him, lays his head and hands against his knees, just as in times long past, as in the days of old when he enjoyed the gifts of the throne room. Then he awakes again, a friendless man. He sees before him seabirds bathing atop the boundless stretch of dark water, their feather-tipped wings outspread as falling snow and hail mingle to frost. Then his heart's wounds grow more grievous, paining him as he longs for his beloved. His sorrow is renewed.
Is there such a thing as insanity among penguins? I try to avoid a definition of insanity. I don't mean that a penguin might believe he's Lennon or Joe Calzaghe, but could they just go crazy because they've had enough of the colony? Well, I've never seen a penguin bashing its head against a rock. They do get disorientated. They end up in places they shouldn't be. A long way from the ocean. These penguins are all heading towards the open water on the right. But one of them caught our eye, the one in the center. He would neither go towards the feeding grounds on the edge of the ice, nor return to the colony. Shortly afterwards, we saw him heading straight towards the mountains, some 60 miles away. Dr. Ainley explained
that even if we caught him and brought him back to the colony, he'd immediately turn around and head straight back for the mountains. But why?
Remote-controlled creatures, their brains powered by atomic energy, roaming the streets, directed from a central point. Utterly fantastic.
I said I gotta get Jesse's number. He said, well, I got Jesse's number.
Nobody gets Jesse's number.
But I wanted to make sure that oh, that's nice.
On my way to Pembrokeshire. I decided, offhand like, on the spur of the moment, to go on a little ancestral tour, so to speak, to go and peruse the dolmens of Pembrokeshire in southeast Wales, for there are many fine dolmens in that region. There is one particular which I have been looking at over the past few years. It keeps popping up on Google Images and the like. A very fine example, the name of which I cannot now recall because it's Welsh and it's hard to pronounce and hard to remember. A right chunky lad with 3 chunky legs and a great chunky capstone. So yes, I'm going to take a look at him. That's where I'm heading right now. He's on the far side, sort of pretty much on the southeasterly tip of Wales. And it's a nice spot. Winter is closing in, of course, but I feel quite brave these days. I've got my coal and my wood stocked up in the back of my van, of this big luxurious van. Well, it's not exactly luxurious, but it's luxurious for me, after living in that tiny little blue van for a year. So yes, I thought I'd take her out. It was time to hit the road and return to the great quest.
The great quest.
I'm not going to go into full cinematic masterworks here. Just a bit of fun, something to keep you ticking along, something to remind us to think big, as the ancients surely did. Aye.
Watch closely. There may be a drama that's not on the program.
You see this little ewe here? That's a Welsh mountain sheep, bred for hardiness. Small ewes. That one happens to be black. They're normally a slightly fawn, slightly golden hues with a white base, but that one is black. Aye. Small, hardy, stocky little ewes. Obviously bred for the mountains, as per Welsh mountain ewe. Oh, there we go. Small and hardy, just like me.
And what about Calzaghe? Untried. And let's go with the left hand straight away. Eubank May didn't know whether he might just try to catch Calzaghe cold.
Well, Calzaghe is a very fast starter. 10 What a start by Calzaghe. He means business, all right, this Welshman.
Remote-controlled creatures, their brains powered by atomic energy, roaming the streets, directed from a central point.
Utterly fantastic.
Get sore hands, you know. I have to say to you, not bad for an old slapper.
Not bad for a slapper. Like I said, you know, you come in our ring and underestimate my power.
I'm in Pembrokeshire now. We're 8 miles away from the finest dolmen on this little route. I thought instead of there were 3 or 4 and I was gonna take them in order, but I've decided to go to the one I really wanted to see, which was furthest away on the right on the western side on the coast of Pembrokeshire.
I'm going to tell you a story about fringe monkeys, how valuable and important they are to protecting our society. It's a true story. In Africa, they have a group of monkeys. They have your core group of monkeys that live in the trees, and they have a hierarchy, they have a leader. Everybody follows the leader, except for the fringe monkeys. The fringe monkeys can't quite follow the leadership. They have different views. They want to do things a little bit differently. So they have a hierarchy of chimpanzees or monkeys. Banishes those monkeys that are called fringe monkeys. They're banished to live out on the fringe of the chimpanzee troop. And everybody acknowledges they're there. They let them do their thing. But the really important thing is fringe monkeys protect the core group of monkeys, because if a predator comes, that'll eat a fringe monkey first, or if there's a disease or something, the fringe monkeys will detect it first and ultimately pay the sacrifice and die. But that gives the core group of monkeys time to prepare and advanced warning. So that's how valuable fringe monkeys are. Or anybody on the fringe.
Creatures, their brains powered by atomic energy, roaming the streets, directed from a central point.
Utterly fantastic.
What do we want? Equality! When do we want? Now! What do we want? Equality! Now! What do we want? Equality!
Be ye big or small, I'll speak my mind, for I've naught left to lose.
Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
I dreamed I might watch you age until you were rendered by the decades frail. For I was quite sure that your smile in that future would blaze in my eyes just the same. And yet, having waited to no avail, to see the mark of my name upon your smile, I do concede that the romance in that gale was mine, and mine alone. So forgive me for asking that I not be expected to commit to conceal, to maintain the mundane by your side once again, for to frame the most prized as the common, without mention, makes a joke of yours and mine. Though I know all too well that that joke is on me, alone I remain with my meaning. So to play that charade, to serve a lie, for a chance to confide what is true, feels a mockery of the divine most unseemly. For proud shone the moon above that future unseen, when it bore me home to find thee.
Remote-controlled creatures, their brains powered by atomic energy, roaming the streets, directed from a central point.
Utterly fantastic. The inner circle came from 4 or 5 miles that way.
Children of the sun, see your time has just begun. Searching for your ways to adventures and freedom.
So superior to the sort of thing one usually sees.
Oh, yes, infinitely. And a leading man, my dear Mrs. Van Climate. Just tremendous power.
Absolutely inspired, my dear Penguin.
It's a penetrating documentary in our times. It's a mirror of our cliched minds, of our sadly weakened moral fiber. Wouldn't you say?
lit red, awash, 100 kindred revellers glow. So seeing I revolve myself about K's key. There, freed beyond full circle's lock, I, tumbling pin of brass loosed drop, to fall within this vault of flesh, beneath glittering domes of neurons meshed, and come to rest at last within time's tomb of selves long past. So, having slipped beneath the present's blade, that unending tally of choices made, grim herald's march of approaching past is here stilled. No more that mortal dread's tattoo, unceasing, indelible, drilled. No more chaotic glyphs of dreams once won and lost. No more those moments infinite tossed, heaped about my golden boss, till those towering mounds of dross divide my eye from all that divine in that once I lost. No more. So enthralled I dance, spry at last, through the vault of time behind my eyes, and there stumble across my eye long past. O fair youth, dreamer yet to live, slight form reborn, what it is to meet your gaze within mine own. O tender boy, prodigal son returned, what it is to share again this breath with thee, to greet that little world thine own, to share that scent of fortune for you half grown. O my truest friend, mine own returned, stand now firm in me. So, whilst Pan's horde pounds o'er this heartbeat's rhythm slowed, time turns full circle, and in one moment's glory blessed, his stony face softens to a smile.
Cofio Maxen, does neb yn ei nabod o. Mae 1600 o flynyddoedd yn amser I hir i'r côr. Ond Magnus Maximus o Cymru yn y flwyddyn 303, yn gadael yn genedl gyfan, a heddiw welen ni yma o storm o'r môr, holled y mellt yr wybren, a gwedded y daran ein côr. Llifed a gler gwangalon, a llyfed y teiog y llawr, died o fagdi o'n gwmpas, rydyn ni'n barod am boriad wan. Rydyn am o hi, rydyn am o hi. Gweitha pawb a phobeth, gweitha pawb a phobeth, gweitha pawb a phobeth I am o hi. Cofiwn ni facsen wledig, a nail ein gwlad a flwyddyn ger bron y gwledydd, byddwn yma hyd dydd y farn, gweitha pob Dic Sion Dafydd, a'r gweitha y gelyn a'i grew, byddwn yma hyd diwedd amser, ac yr iaith Gymraeg yn
Yeah, try this fella. Go on. Aye, that's right.
I was not alone. My fellow tourists were joined by a number of emperor penguins, curious about our presence. It was as though they were seeing us off. Accordingly, I made my way back to the helicopter drop-off point. It was a delightful end to my visit to the colony on that day.
Children of the sun, see your time has just begun. Searching for your ways through adventures every day.
Every day and night with the condor you fly. Your friends too. Thank you, of gold.